Hello, Stephanie Joy with All Things Social Security. We had a Q&A with a short little clip discussion on a particular topic. So I'm going to attach it for you here. It might be something that you're interested in if you clicked on this header. And following that, we're going to go through it a little bit more. So just wanted to give you the heads up. This is where it started from, and then we'll have the bigger discussion right after. All right, chat with you later. Bye-bye.
What is your take, by the way, on with the forms? Because, one of the things that, Social Security will send out are all these, disability report forms, activities of daily living, pain questionnaires. How important do you think those forms are?
I think the pain one is kind of silly.
Mhm.
Because who can do, it's an achy, stabby. It's like, come on. The function report, what I always say to people, is, as far as I can, my theory on those is you can't win on a function report. You always need that foundation of evidence, your medical evidence, just by law even.
Yeah.
But you can sink your ship with a function report if you blow it. Some people, I see some of the strangest things and I'll question about it. And it turns out they were thinking something kind of different when they answered it. And so I'm like, you're going to want to fix that. So it's a little more reflective of what's reality. I think it's very important not to blow it in terms of don't let it sink your ship, because if your function report says you jog 5 miles a day because you're that person and you have a bad back, I really don't think you're going to win. I don't care how many surgeries you've had. I think it's going to show that you could do stuff. Whereas if you didn't say that, and assuming you weren't doing that, because if you are doing that, you probably aren't disabled, but so I think it is, and I'll say this about the third party report too, the 3380. They'll never, even the judges, they'll say, oh, I see the third party statement from the spouse, but it's an interested party and blah, blah. So I'm not putting any weight on it. So I think that one's a total waste, and by design, so you can slip up with being overly exuberant about your studliness or your maybe it's a little ego trying to slip in there. Sometimes I've seen people say things and I'll say, when was the last time you did that? Like they'll talk about their hobby of let's say it was jogging. And I'll say, all right, so you're saying you jog. I'm like, when's the last time? Well, it's been a while. Well, how long? 18 months. I go, is that really still a hobby? Really think that would be something you've done as your current hobby, because you don't do it, and you don't do it because you're bad, you just had a surgery. Sometimes they say the darndest things. And I think it's because they want it to be that way. They're thinking of the past, when it was good. And I think it can be used. You see it in judges' denials all the time, how when they're going to deny, they're going to pull out everything, every supportive thing from a function report.
Well, you make a good
point. You do pull out the good stuff though too.
You make a good point in that, and I'll give an example of how much weight you can lift. We know that if you say you can lift more than 10 pounds, that's potentially an issue, because now you're kind of getting into what they call the light functional capacity, or possibly even medium. And people will sometimes, I've seen a report, I can lift 15 or 20 pounds. That's a bit of a problem, because you can lift 20 pounds. That's a lot of capacity. And 20 pounds is a lot. I mean, I don't know if you've tried to lift 20 pounds. That's a lot.
Blah, blah, blah. It's like holding 2.5 gallons of milk. Can you do that in one hand?
Yeah.
I mean, they don't talk about one hand or two hands. Can you, granted that's bulky, but can you hold that much weight in one hand? And what they don't tell them on the function report is we're looking at it at least occasionally, right? Isn't it?
A third of the day.
And these people are like, well, they could do it once, but they're not told that it's going to be taken as I can do it occasionally.
Right.
So it's kind of like, I don't want to say a trick question, but
I think
what it doesn't say.
No, how much can the most you can, what's the most you can lift? Like you said, it's not like, okay, is this something you could do 8 or 9 times during the course of a day, or within a 3-hour period of time? How much can you lift? Well, like you said, can I lift 50 or 60 pounds once a day? Yeah, maybe. Could I do it 8 or 9 times a day? Probably not. So you got to be real careful about that. I think, like you said, it's really hard for the ego sometimes. And I think, men in particular, especially if you were very physically active, you sort of think of yourself as being that same level of activity. And I can do 15, 20, 30 pounds. And then, like you said, you ask them, well, let's talk about how much that really is. Well, really, I couldn't do that. But you put it on the form.
Hey, so if the subject matter of the video you just listened to is of interest and you want more on it, Stay tuned. Here's another one about the same topic, but a little bit different. Bye now. A little more on the function report. This addresses a few different questions. I mean, generally the whole thing, but also 5, maybe 6, and definitely 20, both 20A, C, D. Ultimately, the SSA does have to determine how long you can sit, stand, walk, and do a variety of other work-related tasks during an 8-hour day. So it tries to ultimately get to how long can you do it in one spiel without breaking, and how much can you do it cumulative in an 8-hour day. So in the function report, it does sometimes ask you to possibly give them an exact amount or an estimated but numerical amount. Question 5 doesn't do that, but sometimes people gratuitously throw it in and like, I can only sit for an hour and a half. Okay, that makes you pretty much not disabled in many jobs. So not that you shouldn't put the exact amount if you know it, but I think a lot of times people make big mistakes when they put these exact amounts. For instance, you can sit for an hour and a half and then you feel like you need to get up because you're stiff, in pain, whatever. The assumption then is you could probably do that repeatedly all day long, and then there's nothing really to stop you from a sedentary job, at least in terms of sitting abilities. So I would suggest you actually, barring any medical advice to the contrary, so if you feel the need to speak to your doctor, go ahead. But I would suggest you actually sit down and try it for a week straight. If you're the one that says an hour and a half or 30 minutes, whatever the amount is, why don't you consider actually seeing if you're correct in that? Because people make really broad assumptions about themselves, and I'd say 95% of the time, maybe even more, it's wrong. It's just wrong. So if you sit down at a table, sitting upright, because that would be a work type sitting. I'm not talking about recliner or, jamming back on your couch with a bunch of pillows. In a work type chair, that could be your kitchen table, sitting upright, reasonably professionally. How long can you to keep your mind from being too bored, put the TV on in front of you or something. But how long can you sit there before any discomfort starts? If it gets beyond minimal, when? And then if you go and take a break, let's say you want to get up for 5-10 minutes. I don't know. That'll be your body telling you what. Go back and sit down again. Put in a little notebook. How long did you sit before you were like, I got to get up? And I'm not talking about having to go to the bathroom. I'm talking about due to the sitting discomfort. Can you go back and then do the same amount again? Do it from between 9 and 5. You can give yourself a 15-minute break in the morning, 15-minute break in the afternoon, and a half-hour lunch to deviate, because that is what the SSA is going to assume that all jobs offer, despite the fact that we know they don't. It's just part of the rules. So make sure you know if you're going to give a specific number, as opposed to saying very limited or beyond a short time, make sure you're accurate, because you could be sinking your ship with your inaccuracies. Same is true for all the different, when you describe the things in 20A, because it asks for you to describe a little more specifically whatever you check off in 20A, be sure to not speak loosely and inaccurately with assumptions. Go and test yourself before you say how long you can walk. You'll see that C20, how far can you walk before needing to stop and rest? Measure it. Get out there and measure it. You can do that in a variety of ways. It could be the end of your driveway when you know your driveway's 20 yards. Maybe when you go to the mailbox, you actually have to stop once you get to the mailbox, rest, and then come back. Maybe you actually have to take your cane, crutches, whatever. It could be resting due to being short of breath or winded, or it could be due to pain in, feet, ankles, legs, knees, hips, back. So give it all. And again, journal it down. Some people estimate by city block. Sometimes I think they no longer know really what they're doing, because a lot of them don't live near the city anymore. So they probably haven't tested it. So maybe use that GPS on your phone, and it might tell you how far you've gone. Same is true for paying attention. That's kind of a loose cannon, because oftentimes it depends on our pain levels. If it does, I would note that in there. I'd add a special little note. And maybe the amount you give is when your pain is at its lowest. If it's, always there, or the moments you're pain-free. If you have pain-free moments, sometimes it depends on the subject matter. Let's face it. There are some things that I can't pay attention to more than 3 minutes. Okay. Give me some social security disability and you got me for 12 hours. So it really depends for all of us, I think. But if yours is pain related and mine is not pain related, but yours probably is, give it some serious thought and take some notes. Give it a week, maybe even 2, and really take a note as to attention. Maybe at different times of the day when your pain is at different levels, or your fatigue, or whatever one of your major symptoms is, that takes you off of attention. Okay, that's it for those. It's about specificity when you don't actually know how specific it is. Okay, don't guess. What you think is very limited and you're guessing, I can only do it for an hour, guess what? That's quite able for many occupations. So again, you could be sinking your own ship with your function report by not being accurate. If it's accurate because you know it's accurate, because you've checked it out, like we're talking about here, then so be it. There's other reasons, obviously, that disable you, or else you'd probably be out working. So that limits your occupations you can do, but other things limit more. And we haven't gotten to that, yet. And if you have a professional working with you, obviously you're going to get to that point. But for this, I'd be very careful about speaking loosely about that which you do not know much about because you haven't checked it out. Okay. All righty. More later.